everybody was kind of getting in their place. So my name is deanchanter. So I wanted to share with you a little bit today about my journey over the last 6 months or so that I've been with Capital One. Aptly titled my accidental experiment with Modern Agile. But before I get into that, just kind of a little bit about me and who I am. So like I said, so right now I'm currently, my official title is Senior Manager Scrum Master at Capital One. My role is I play a little bit of a release train engineer, for those that are familiar with the Scaled Agile framework. I am also a manager myself. I have Scrum Master direct reports. And also I do quite a bit of what we would call agile coaching. I work with the directors both in the tech side and the product side as well on a one-on-one coaching basis. So I wear a lot of hats. It's a lot of fun. Before I was at Capital One, I was at Intel for the last 12 years. Started out in hardware QA, worked my way up into project management, also led a team of software engineers at one point. When I got into my project management journey, I was project managing a team of software engineers, and our director was like, "Hey, there's this like agile thing out there," and this was what, 5 or 6 years ago. She's like, "We should do that." And then we had a peer organization that had applied Scrum years before, and then it was in the process of applying SAFe to their organization. So basically, we just copied what they did. She's like, go up to Boulder, get certified as an SPC, and come teach us how to do SAFe. And I was the transformation lead for that organization. So I'm not in good standing anymore. Not because I don't want to. It's just I'm not teaching any SAFe classes right now, so there's no reason for me to be in good standing. But I was a certified SPC at one point. My journey from Intel took me from South Carolina to Portland, Oregon, and now I'm back in Virginia. I'm with Capital One, so I've been crisscrossed across the country over the last couple of years. This is my crew, my Agile team, and yes, we are an Agile team. We actually have Kanban boards up at home, and we apply standards. Every Saturday morning, I get the kids around the refrigerator, and I draw pictures of them for their chores, and they know that when they're done, they move it to the done column. So it's kind of cool. So when I first got to Capital One six months ago, this is what I found. I found 22 teams, all reporting up through one tech organization. I found Kanban teams, I found Scrum teams, I found the combination of both. I found these things called bubbles. Yeah. The bubbles were supposed to be arts within the art. What it was I think it was a local solution. For those that are familiar with SAFe, kind of about 2 years ago, SAFe kind of came out with the 4 levels. So that idea of you have an art and you have your value stream. So I think that was this organization's attempt to try something like that. They didn't want to call the top level something different other than art, and so that they still wanted the pieces. So I found that. I had a team of about 10 Scrum Masters that ultimately ended up reporting up through me. That was just me, the one RT for all this. I found a lot of deadlines. I found a lot of risk. I came in about halfway through, a little bit less than halfway through this organization's move off on-prem data servers and into the cloud. So all of their web apps, all of their scripts and this and that and the others, they wanted to get off-prem and into the cloud. Like I said, I found some semblance of SAFe. I found applications that were getting modernized. So we had web apps that were still in .NET framework that they're now modernizing. And I found the organization I work with, I didn't explain this very well, is we do all of the applications, whether they're web apps, whether they're flows, what have you, for all of the customer communication channels. So when you call 1-800-Capital-One, we've written software for that, whether it's the robot, the IVR, or what I call the robot on the other end of the phone, whether that's the actual web app that the agents use on their desktop in the call center, the routing for those calls, the chat web application. So when you're actually chatting with an agent, as opposed to calling them, we do all of that. So needless to say, these applications that we make don't make Capital One money. So what the product teams have been trying to do is make money by saving money. What can we do to save money in this experience, right? If we can keep folks talking to the IVR instead of talking to an agent, then we can save X million of dollars a year, that kind of thing. So a lot of pressure. So shortly after my journey there, this is kind of what I realized. I was like, we need to get back to the basics of Lean Agile in a new modern way without disrupting the flow of work. Because this was a train that had been launched years ago. These were teams that had been trained on Scrum or Kanban 4, 5, 6 years ago. Capital One, for those that don't know, Capital One has been on an Agile journey for a long time in multiple different ways. The biggest, the most recent, is when Capital One acquired ING. ING was a very agile house, and so they brought a lot of that with them and taught Capital One that. So it wasn't about, I didn't need to come in and go, all right, everybody, let's do Scrum. They knew how to do that. We needed to figure out something new and different what we wanted to do. The other thing that was interesting was when the second day I was at Capital One, I was shown to my desk, and these stickers were all over my desk. And they were in the drawers, and I was like, what is this? Because that came from a very much a Scrum scaled Agile framework in Intel. That's what we did. And I'd heard of Modern Agile. I'd seen it I'm very active on Twitter. So I'd seen it fly by, hashtag Modern Agile every now and again. But I saw this sticker. And I had a naked laptop, then it's not now. And so I was like, I slapped a sticker on my laptop. That was the first sticker that went on my laptop. I was like, I need a sticker on my laptop. I'll put it there. So I stared at it for a long time. And I was like, okay, that's cool. We're Modern Agile. All right. I'm modern. I like being modern. I'm young. I'm hip. I want to be Modern Agile. So what Modern Agile is 4 principles. There's no framework for those not familiar. It's just Joshua Kerievsky kind of came out with this 3 or 4 years ago. He did the keynote at Agile 2015, I think 15, 16, with this, and it's becoming more popular. He did the keynote at Lean Agile US as well in February, which was very, very good. But he said, hey, we want to do 4 things, and we want to do them well as an Agile organization, whether we're Scrum, whether we're Kanban, whether we're Safe, whether we're Less, whether we're DAD, whether we're Lean, product development. This is what we want to do. We want to deliver value continuously, so as fast as we can. We're always giving the customer some sort of value, whether it's daily, whether it's weekly, as fast as we can, right? And we're going to keep that pattern up. All right. We want to experiment and learn rapidly. The experiments, whether it's experiment with our process, whether experiment to improve something on our team, experimenting on the product itself, right? How are we learning, right? Are we doing mock-ups? Are we doing customer trials, right? We want to make safety a prerequisite, right? So that's psychological safety on the team, right? We want a happy team, right? We don't want, deadline driven.
By safety, you don't mean security.
It's a part of it.
Okay, so can you elaborate what you mean by safety?
Yeah, so what Joshua was saying by safety here, right, is that psychological safety, right? I'm happy at work. I want to be here, right? I don't feel like I can't speak up. That kind of safety, right? And then make people awesome, right? How do we pour into our knowledge workers so that they're continually becoming more awesome, if I can use that. So this is what I found, right? And so what happened was and that's what I'll share for the rest of the talk, right, is I was like, hey, we just need to do some pointing experiments, right? We want to do some things to change the way that we work, and I'll share those experiments. And what it hit me, I guess back in February, so maybe about 3 months into my journey at Capital One, my body unfortunately decided that my gallbladder as a product was going to be EOL. And so I was stuck at home for several weeks with nothing better to do than listen to Agile podcasts. Because one can only watch so many sci-fi movies before they go crazy. And so I was listening to the Modern Agile show that Josh does, and he was interviewing John Cutler. Anybody familiar with John Cutler? So if you're a product person, I highly recommend following John Cutler on Twitter or his Medium page. John Cutler is one of those rare breeds that's a product person that understands Lean and Agile. And so he's really, really cool. And so they were just talking with each other, and John said something that was very interesting based on the question that Joshua asked. And Joshua was like, what do you feel about Modern Agile? What does it mean to you? And he goes, well, I feel like it means that we're safe to try anything to make our teams better. And I was like, and I was actually preparing for an all-day strategy meeting with my Scrum Masters for the next week, or had that in my brain. And it hit me then, I was like, we are Modern Agile. That's what we're doing. We're doing that in our organization. And so it's been kind of neat, because I've been trying to kind of put some words to what we've been doing, and this was it. Any questions about Modern Agile or kind of our journey through it? Before I kind of almost pivot here. So what I'm going to do now, then, so the rest of this is just really a series of talking through some of the things that we've been doing over the last 6 months. And I can go as slow or as fast as y'all want to based off the questions. And as you've already probably figured out by now, I don't mind talking, so I will keep talking unless you stop me. So the first thing that we did was look at the way that we were defining our work. So I mentioned, right, that a lot of our platforms, specifically our web apps, they were trying to modernize. And more specifically, the web app that the agents in the call center use to get the customer data. And so that group of teams was really in kind of in a startup type mode, right? Because what they said they didn't want to do is they didn't want to look at the current application and go, well, here's the 150 things it does, just make it do it in Node, right? And so they almost was like just kind of acted like that application didn't exist. And honestly, one of the reasons why is because the folks that built that application aren't at Capital One anymore. Or at least aren't on the team, so they don't even know half of what it does, right? And so they're like, I'm not going to spend the time cataloging that. We're going to go do what we need to do. And the workforce is different now in the call center. It's more fluid. It's younger. The call center is looking at going to more of a gig economy, right? And so you may have agents only working once a month because that's when they want to work, that Uber model, right? So when they needed an application that supported that, right? They couldn't invest in 6 months of training an agent that may not be there 6 months later. So that's what we decided. We decided that the way that we would discover our work is using the lean product discovery method. So lean product discovery or lean startup, right? The idea that every problem that we're trying to solve, we're going to look at it with a small, lightweight business case and create a canvas on it. And we're going to experiment until we get to the solution that we want. So the developers literally go down to the call center. So we actually have a unique opportunity in Richmond where the call center is only a mile and a half away from where the developers work. And so they do. They go there to the call center, they put a headset on, and they listen for an hour every sprint. And they'll ask questions after the hour's up. And the agents love it, by the way, because they love that, as the customer, they're like, hey, the people that are developing my new product, because they know that the new product is coming, they're coming and talking that they think that it's the coolest thing in the world, that somebody cares about them enough to come figure out how they work, right? And so, and it's really interesting too, is they'll go sit with an agent that's been there, 20 years, and knows that product, knows the current product like the back of their hands. Or they'll go sit with someone that's been in the call center for 6 months, and they learn something totally different. Because when the MVP that they launched in September, a lot of the feedback they got from the tenured agents was, this is too easy. It's actually slowing me down because I know where the dirty laundry is in that old program, and I can get around a lot of stuff. Now you're forcing me through one flow, and I don't like it. So what happens, so what happened there is, like, when you look at our roadmap, it's this, what we call a dual track agile roadmap, right? That term kind of floats around out there in Twitter. And so what happens is, if you look at our roadmap, it actually is broken into 2 pieces, discovery and delivery, right? And so what you got here, if you look at our roadmap, is these are the items, these are the problems that we're trying to go solve. Or maybe it's the areas we're trying to figure out what the problems are, right? So it's a developer and a product manager going into the call center and going, hey, when you take a call because somebody's calling to suspect fraud on their call, what happens? Where's the pain there? And trying to figure out how to solve that. Is that better UI? Is that better speed? Do you need different information? Right? And iterating on that. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll actually go sit with the agent and kind of fake their screen. So their screen has got a developer sitting behind it and moving widgets around every call, right? And seeing what experiment works. And then they'll bring that back and they'll put it in at scale, right? And so those are the experiments that we're trying to run. And we're doing that in parallel with delivery, right? And so the delivery to us then is putting what we discovered at scale, right? Hardening it, making sure that it's in production, right, and ready to go. Because what was easy to mock up for one agent is totally different for 16,000. Another way that we do this, this is in our IVR space, right? So we actually run experiments on real customers in the IVR. And the way we do that is we throttle a certain percentage of the traffic, right? So 5% of the customers get a different experience in the IVR, and we monitor that over time to see what the different effects are, right? Things like, do I ask them the same question twice if I didn't understand their response? Things like, if they pound out, do I ask them one more time? Do you really want to go up to an agent, or can I help you, right? Another experiment that we're thinking about running is, even though the IVR didn't understand the color, what if I use machine learning and transcribe that, what we call utterance, and display it for the agent? Because guess what? The IVR is going to say, hey, thank you for calling Capital One. How can I help you today? And if it didn't understand you, what's the agent going to say when it first talks to the customer? Hey, the same thing. And that person's probably pissed that they're having to talk to an agent. So the last thing they want to do is be asked the same question that they just got asked. So that's the experiment we're running right now, right? And what do we like? And we don't know what that's going to what that product's going to look like. It may not even do anything, right? But instead of going off and spending 6 months building what we think is the right thing, we're trying to just see if we can learn something there. So I'd like to kind of close this piece, right? I liked the way I described this to the tech partners when we first went up. It's the two knobs, right? We've got the discovery knob and the delivery knob, and we actually throttle it based off what's coming. Because we could crank the discovery knob wide open because we actually have 7 teams on this, so we could run a lot of experiments. But if we learn stuff faster than we can deliver it, then that's still not helpful. Then we're actually back where we started. We've got just this massive backlog that we can't deliver. The other thing was we want to pull that delivery knob in such a way that we're getting, because sometimes the experiments actually do take code, right? We actually have to go put code in prod. So we're trying to find multiple paths through delivery, right? Is there like a beta region or a dirty region or dark launches that we can do to get code out there that may not be the final code. Any questions on kind of our dual knob, lean product discovery, lean startup, dual track agile approach? Yeah. And one more thing I will say on this, like, we're iterating on the way. Like, I had a consultant come in and he ran a workshop with us and shared us the business campus and lean startup, but like, we didn't completely destroy the way that other work, because like there's tech work that still goes through and there's legacy work that still goes through the same way. Like, we just really, honestly, what we did is we're encouraging the product managers and the team leads to change the way that they talk. That's really all we did.
So 2 questions now. One is, have you taken some like before and after metrics? Because the idea of this is to deliver faster and more, I was going to say better products, but products which got closer fitting to the needs, right?
Right.
So I mean, I'm struggling with what would be a before metric, but the general question is, did you take any?
We are, and I'm actually going to talk about that in a minute. But yeah, I mean, a couple of things that we're actually seeing reduced amount of feature development WIP, so work in progress, because we're working on the thing that matters, right? And we are getting somewhat ahead of the emergencies, right? Or there's more room for them, so they flow through the system better. Our cycle time has absolutely gone down. I mean, immensely. It went down from an average of about 120 days for features down to around about 45 days per feature. And I think that's Little's law in effect, right? We reduce our WIP, so our cycle time is going to go down, for sure. Our teams are another metric, which it's hard to measure, but definitely our Scrum Masters observe this, for sure. Our teams are happier working this way because they get to go hang out with the customers. They feel like they're working on something that matters, for sure. Our agents are definitely happier, for sure. So I mentioned this a little bit, in the delivery stage, but looking at the way that we release, we in particular, one of the platforms that we had on average, and it wasn't even a cadence, it was definitely an average, we were releasing it every 6 to 8 weeks. We're now releasing it twice a week. And even if, and that's simply through applying, good DevOps practices, right? With feature branching and integration testing, right? And what we actually, one of the things, the interesting experiments we do here, this has actually only happened once in the last month, so the last 8 releases. Even if there's nothing ready to go into production, we will still release the last release. Because we learned something. Because if nothing else, it gives us a 4-hour window to go play in prod. Right? So like we do things like, well, why don't we fail over from east to west while we have things down? And we learned something. We learned something last week. Our monitoring in west is not as good as it is in the east. So if we did fall over, then we would kind of be running blind for a little while until we fix that. We learn things like maybe we should, because we do blue-green releases, meaning we release one place, get it all stable, and then switch the traffic over. We learned something the other day of maybe we should leave green up for a day and not tear it down. It's actually faster to do that, right? So we learn things in actually the way that we release, just by doing those reps, right? Getting good at that. Another thing that we're doing is actually the Scrum Masters are getting more involved in that release process and helping. And so, because it's getting increasingly difficult to actually be the person that does the release at Capital One. We found out another one of those release, even if you don't have anything, we found out the hard way that if the person doing the release touch the Git scripts, they can't release. The enterprise now considers that touching dev. And so we have separation of duties, meaning if you can touch dev, you can't touch prod, right? And so enterprise surprised us, and we didn't realize that touching the Git scripts was touching dev. So a couple of my Scrum Masters are actually in the process of learning how to push stuff to prod. So all sorts of fun experiments about releasing, for sure. So experimentation. So one of the things that didn't mention in my intro, and I should have, so my journey at Intel was lean before it was agile. So Intel being a huge manufacturing company, in addition to being a development company. So Jamie Flinchball came into Intel years and years ago, right? And so I was lean before I even knew I was lean, right? The way my boss taught me how to run a team when I started running a team was we had daily stand-ups. And we decided what we were going to do that day. We committed to finishing something that day, and we discussed what we did the next morning, right? So we were doing that kind of stuff before I even knew what Agile was. I just didn't know. So when I came to Capital One, I said, hey guys, I really want us to talk about the way that we run our experiments and the way that we design our experiments. For those that are familiar with hardcore lean manufacturing, right? Toyota has this thing called the A3 problem-solving methodology. It's I want to bring A3s in. Literally, at Toyota, especially in the development, right? If as an engineer, you're handed an A3 piece of paper, and you're told to go solve a problem. And what happens when you come back to your coach or your manager, right? You hand them your A3 and said, "This is what I learned today." Usually, what will happen is they'll ball it up, they'll throw it away. They're like, "Okay, go do it again." Because the point being that if you took the time to get everything you learned on an A3 piece of paper, then you don't need that paper anymore because you learned it that well and it's already ingrained in your brain. So that has come a long way. We met a gentleman named Claudio Perrone, and he came and taught us his popcorn flow. If you have not met Claudio Perrone or have not seen the popcorn flow, I absolutely urge you to check this out. This is awesome. And if you can do it, have Claudio come into your organization. He is the coolest speaker. So this is actually his slide that he let me borrow, and all of his slides are this cool. So Claudio taught us the popcorn flow, which is just basically kind of marrying A3 thinking and Kanban. And the idea being that when we think about an experiment, so one of the things that Claudio was saying about A3 is really good for fixing complex problems. It's not so good for fixing complicated problems, right? So for those that are familiar with Kinevin, right? And so if you can get down to a root cause, then but our problems in the knowledge space, right, when we're talking about software development, is sometimes we may never get to root cause. We're just trying to find a happy path through, right? And so every time we think about experiments, whether it's these experiments on the product, or whether it's the experiments that we're running to fix our process, the experiments for the releases, right? This is the way we look at it. What is our problem? What is our observations? What are our options, right? So the idea there is pulling back a little bit and getting away from that. What is the solution? And having the conversation about what are our options, right? That's another way that we create psychological safety, right? Is that now the loudest voice isn't the one that's always solutioning the problem. And so then one of our experiments we're going to run to figure out if we picked the right option, right? So we commit to something, we run the experiment, and then if we like the results, then we now keep that, right? That's now part of the process, and that's now the product that we're going to go after, right? So popcorn flow, awesome. I love popcorn flow. So another thing that that I did with my team of Scrum Masters is I wanted to make them awesome and create psychological safety in my team. So some of you who went through CSM training or whatever may have seen this before, or a slightly different version of this. This is my updated version of this. And so what I told my team was that we've got product managers that are trying to discover, so notice the word discover now shows up here, because we're changing the way we think, the right value, right? Our makers, whether it's developers, whether it's designers, whether it's UX folks, whether it's the DevOps folks, right, whoever that is, right, it's their job to build the right value. And so what I told my team, and Capital One does not respect this title, but we like this title. My team of lean agile leads is it's our job to increase the right value, right? And I stole this from looking at the coaching that's done in places like Toyota, right? What are we doing to remove the waste out of the system and help the system go faster? And we do this by becoming that player coach, right? They're getting closer in to the middle of these circles, right? And being able to think, and we all, all of these folks in these circles, getting them closer, right? The makers, right? Are the makers identifying waste in their system and identifying waste in their process and helping solve that? Are they waiting for the Scrum Master to do it for them, right? Are the product managers thinking the way the makers think, so when they do come up with a solution, it's something that's actually doable, right? Or are they coming up with this so overcomplicated solution that's going to take us 3 years to build, and by then we're not going to need it, right? Any questions on this? Yes?
What role is the player coach in terms of like your organization, your team?
If you were to look at the team, it's the Scrum Master, the Lean Agile lead, but I'm asking them to find that balance and be that player coach.
So it's not, okay.
Right? It's like that's what I told them when we were in our all strategy. Like, hey, this is you, but I want you to think here. Think that way.
Okay.
Right? Like I mentioned, right? One of my Scrum Masters, she does releases because that's what the team needed. And because she's doing releases, she's actually seeing the waste in the process and helping go solve that. Right?
So in other words, the Scrum Master becomes a doer.
It does, yes. Yeah. Right? Because I'm going to say this at risk of doing what I don't like to do and bash the framework, but it's really easy for a Scrum Master to go follow this, make the team do the ceremonies, right? But that's a Scrum Administrator, right? I want somebody that's going and coaching the team to be faster. And that's what I'm doing at the leadership level, right?
Where do you tend to see your Scrum Masters come from?
All over the place. I had a team that was already built there, so we've got Scrum Masters that have been Scrum Masters for a while. I've got, because I am at Capital One, I have the luxury of having process folks, operational folks, some of which were Lean Six Sigma black belts. They make great Scrum Masters. Former product people that were just wanting to switch make great Scrum Masters because they know the product. Like I mentioned myself, right? I came from a tester development background.
how do you help them in that transition from administrator to kind of value creation?
Oh, good question. I mean, we're doing it as a team, right? I think that's one of the luxuries that we have because that's what I'm doing as the manager, is that's how I'm pouring into them. They also have a grassroots workshop, community of practice that they do together, which I sit in the back room for that. And one of my more stronger Scrum Masters kind of is leading them through talking through different things. Like right now, they're going through Mary and Tom Poppendick's seven lean wastes, right, and really changing the way that they think.
One more question on that.
Yeah.
If that person is doing more for the organization, do you often run into conflict with other like managerial figures, and how do you handle that where other players doesn't have to be a manager?
No, honestly, because honestly the feedback I'm getting is like, this is awesome. I mean, I feel like the Scrum Masters are providing value they've never provided before. Right. Now I am being very cognizant and careful that we're not falling into what the industry would call that delivery lead role, where the Scrum Masters are kind of playing a delivery lead. In my opinion, is just a modern term for project manager. So I'm being very cognizant that we're not falling into that role. The other slide that I showed them, which I kicked out of here, was what I actually showed them was this. Is to kind of think about it this way, right? You've got the coach on this side and the delivery on this side, and it's their job to find the balance, right? Because all too often, I feel like as an agile coach, we're kind of waiting for that perfect moment, or that perfect workshop, or that perfect talk that changes the organization. Or we fall over here, we kind of really just be a project manager with a different title. I was like, you got to find a balance. And sometimes the best coaching opportunities are when we're in the battle, when we're in the trench with the makers. So another thing that we've been doing is some really pointed experiments on creating safety. Things that we're doing with safety. So I didn't introduce Charles. So Charles is actually one of my Scrum Masters. So he didn't know this, but I'm going to let him share a couple of his stories. Charles, you want to share your thumb story and your toilet paper story?
Sure. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Charles Solomon, Scrum Master on Dean's team. So I'll start off with the thumbs up, thumbs down. So we have an S2 daily, and one of my product managers, she was very engaging, but a lot of times it became a status update meeting, and we weren't getting through all the teams, and also we weren't getting through the impediments that we needed to talk about. So to basically change the dynamics of S2 to make sure we're raising impediments, right? What I do is in the beginning, I say thumbs up, thumbs down. Thumbs up means everything's good to go, and then we can transition into whether is it an upcoming release we need to have clarity on, or she can also ask her questions to her product managers, but I thought that was awesome. We have both product and tech in our S2. If we have thumbs down, that means it's a problem. We need to identify what the risk is or what the impediment is, and does it have an owner. So I just found it to be a very useful manner of kind of getting straight to the meat. And if an issue arises, that we have clarity on what that is or risk. The TP exercise is something I kind of created where I basically, it's a more of an inspirational coaching aspect. So what I do is I buy a bunch of toilet paper, and I have one team member say, okay, who can wrap me in TP the fastest, like a mummy style, right? So I time them for 3 minutes, and I see how much can they kind of cover me within 3 minutes, right, of TPing me. So I time them for 3 minutes. Every time that person fails, right? They can't wrap me in TP in 3 minutes by themselves. And then I say, okay, Now I want everyone, which, whatever the size of the team, to rep me in TP in 3 minutes. And every time they do, they successfully rep me in 3 minutes with TP. And then I just kind of try to coach them a little bit on the Agile principles, right? So number one is you were laser focused on a task, right? The second thing is they're communicating like, oh, I got his legs, I'll cover his arm, I'll cover his mouth, I have a big mouth. The third piece is they're trusting each other that they're going to get the job done. So I try to do a really fun exercise. They get to, TP me, all right, so they get joy out of that. But it's really just trying to communicate a message of what they should be doing each and every day, day by day, sprint by sprint, PI by PI.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, and I stole the thumbs from him, so we use it in all of our Scrums or S2s. Actually, we have some of our Scrum Masters using it in their stand-ups now. And because I thought it was so cool at the way that it created empathy within the group, because the more introverted folks don't feel like they have to talk, but if they have something that it gives them a way to signal it, right? And then the folks that are going to be more tended to give status updates or just take up the whole time, right? It forces them to kind of have to wait if there's something more important to talk. So yeah, it's really changed the game for us. That simple movement of the thumbs has really changed the game on creating empathy in our Agile ceremonies. We actually now use it, when we're in planning, right? How do you feel about where we are? So if we're doing big room planning, right? Then in the middle of the day, how do you feel right now? And we get a lot of thumbs down. Well, there's these 3 risks right here. We need to just identify. Oh, let's talk about that. Yeah. Did you have a question?
Well, I think you answered it. I was trying to understand at what level of granularity you were doing some thumbs up and some.
The 2 pizza ceremonies, right? So anytime we have a ceremony small enough for 2 pizzas, right? Whether it's a team stand up or a scrum of scrums or what have you, right? A couple other things that we've been doing. We let them eat cake. Right? We celebrate everything. We celebrate birthdays. We celebrate holidays. Actually today, Charles and I are missing it, but most of our teams are going and having we have a froyo shop on campus, and it's half off on Fridays. And so they're all going and having froyo today without us. If a team does something exceptional, that's exceptional, like a big release they've been trying to get out or a feature they've been trying to get out, I'll actually go. We have the luxury that our VP is actually on the floor. She has her own office, but she's on the floor. I'll send her an email like, "Hey, Melanie, you might want to walk by so-and-so team today and just give them a high five." So we do things like that. We have game Thursdays, so during lunch, right? Teams will come bring their games, right? Whether it's checkers or chess or my personal favorite, Star Realms, right? And we'll just play, right? And there's something about interacting with your teammates in a non-work environment, even if it's just for an hour during lunch, just changes the way that you interact with them when you are talking about work. Right? We had a very difficult PI planning a couple of months ago. We knew it was going to be difficult because it was kind of like the last one before a big launch, and so a lot of risks were popping up. And I knew that. I made sure we had an happy hour after that PI planning, right? And I made sure I bought everybody some beer and some appetizers, right? The other thing we're doing is we are taking pulses of the happiness surveys with the teams. We haven't quite figured out how to do this yet. We've been trying lots of different experiments. For those who are familiar, we're using Tiny Pulse. We like Tiny Pulse because it's tiny and it allows the leadership. Tiny Pulse has this feature where if there's a comment, a particularly interesting comment from somebody, that the leadership can anonymously reply to that person. so that they have no idea who they're replying to. They're actually replying to the comment, not the person, and see if they can create that dialogue. Sometimes that dialogue stays anonymous. Sometimes the person will say, "Hey, it's me. Can we have lunch?" Tiny Pulse probably is not going to work for us permanently because it doesn't allow us to dice the data very well. And so if we want to just look at one team, Tiny Pulse doesn't really allow us to do that. So we're looking at other things to do. But we will, our plan, intention is to have a 2 to 5 question survey at least once a month for the teams. And it'll be the same questions. The idea is to look at the happiness trends over time, right? And that's one of the things that our Scrum Masters do are very cognizant of, even in their observations. And I'll get all the time, like, "Hey, Dean, did you know about such and such?" Right? And so we're actually talking through how to coach through team conflict, right? And that being part of their role. And if so, we actually, one of my Scrum Masters, she is really good at coaching circles, and so she will use coaching circles sometimes as the way to deal with conflict, right? And so just sit there and she'll just ask questions, right? So all of the fun stuff that we're doing to try to create psychological safety. Which I'm a big
What
fan
is
of.
the training curriculum or continuing education of your Scrum Masters? It's kind of interesting.
Oh, that's a great question. Any and everything. That's why we're here. That's why I brought Charles with me today. I encourage him to the conferences. We actually do have the luxury of having a pretty strong training curriculum at Capital One. So all sorts of classes and stuff that they can take, and I encourage them to take, not just the Agile classes, but take the behavioral science classes, take the tech classes, right? A lot of we're using AWS in a lot of our platforms, and so we now have the AWS practitioner, which is a self-driven course. It's like, what is it, Charles? 10, 12 hours of videos, and so a lot of them are self-pacing themselves through that, and they have they meet once a week over lunch to talk about what they've learned.
That's corporate education, that's like a center of excellence that provides those different forms.
Yeah.
What have you done within your circle other than what you can control? I assume you have limited influence over what type of courses, corporate or an enterprise can put together.
I actually do have the ability to bring in just about. I told you about in Claudio. This week actually, Tuesday and Wednesday, we brought in an expert on EasyBI, which is an Atlassian plugin for metrics. That's actually what I'm about to talk about. So I'm big on continuous education, and it's not just one set agenda, right? And I mentioned that my team does kind of do a community of practice. We also we actually have an enterprise-wide community of practice that they're a part of, and so we have the luxury where my director is also an Agilist, and so we have peer teams that we go and hang out with and have brown bags with, and then hanging out with the enterprise as well. So all sorts of stuff. Yeah, and I think that's the trick, right? I encourage a lot of them to get involved. So we're in Richmond, right? Getting involved in the Richmond Agile meetups, and and doing all that kind of stuff too, for sure. Good question. I like that question. So another thing that I did, one of my bachelor's degrees was in math, and so I'm a data nerd. I'm a numbers nerd, and so we're using Jira, unfortunately. Jira is not very good at visualizing work, especially a lot of work. And so we are using EasyBI as a plugin to try to visualize some of this stuff. You mentioned earlier, right? How do we know that things are changing? This is one of the ways that we know. So this is actually real data of our cycle time, right? So over the last 6 months, our cycle time has trended down. Not only has our cycle time trended down, is it's actually starting to get more predictable, right? We're actually turning the corner now. This, I pulled this the other day. I probably pulled this 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I looked at this the other day. This line kind of comes out to here now. Our feature delivery is pretty much cyclical, right? Every 30 days we're getting something new. It's pretty cool. I threw this up here. We were talking the other day when we started showing the metrics to the teams, right? Again, we think about psychological safety every time we do something, right? It's like, well, aren't we just creating these to have a stick to beat them with? I was like, no, absolutely not, right? The point was that the metrics are kind of like the speed limit, right? Are you going 75 and a 55, right? Or my favorite analogy is like, I turn on Waze every morning on my commute, right? And it's in alert only mode, right? So it doesn't tell me where I'm going, but I know how to get to work. But what it does do is it tells me, hey, in 1 mile there's a traffic jam, so that I don't run right up against that car when it's stopped, right? Or hey, in half a mile there's a cop. Maybe I shouldn't be going 75 and not 55, right? So that's kind of the way I like to see the metrics, right? Or kind of like the magic 8 ball, right? The metric, especially leading indicators. Obviously, these are lagging indicators, meaning they're telling us what just happened. But like we just started looking a couple of weeks ago at the days in progress for a feature. So the features that we're currently working on, how long have we been working on those? So when it starts getting over 30 days, we're like, hey, the outlook is not so good, right? I'm thinking about bringing in more often doing Monte Carlo simulations, if you're familiar with Monte Carlo. And actually once a week, doing a Monte Carlo sim on every single one of our features. And does Monte Carlo say that we're actually trending towards the target date that we want to be? Right? Because we do, that's a good point, because we do have to kind of be cognizant of when we're delivering our stuff, because of the stuff that we do is going to affect 6,000 or 16,000 agents that have to be trained on something new, and so we can't just drop it in their lap, right? Because it takes at least 7 days to train that whole set, because they only have their team meeting once a week, right? And based on their shift is when that team meeting is. And then it takes the training folks 2 to 4 weeks to get that training prepared for them. And I put this under kind of the delivering value continuously, right? Because that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to get predictable in how often we're delivering value. So, my accidental experiment in Modern Agile. It's been fun. We've got a lot left that we want to do. One of the things in my personal backlog is leadership, and making sure that that leadership is staying engaged, especially ones that have been around for a while. And Agile is a thing that we did. I've already been there. I was like, well, actually, we're doing a lot that I need you to stay engaged with. Are you creating psychological safety with your teams, right? Another experiment that we're just starting to run. So we were a safe house. So we're actually looking now into some of our teams, especially like the ones that are doing the more startup, and then going into more of a continuous grooming mode. Meaning that we'll eventually stop doing big plannings, and we'll just start pulling features in, as teams finish it, right? And they might be out of cadence at that point. And we can do that, and we can have that conversation now because we've done so much work with our release that the coordination in the release area isn't as much as it used to be. Anything else, Charles, that we've been thinking about doing?
One of the things is we're just trying to get to a CI/CD,
Yeah.
and a lot of the experimentation around how can we get there.
Yes, we still do have platforms that still do need to apply DevOps and CI/CD methodologies. So we're still working. We've got probably a dozen or so platforms that we work with and some are at different stages than other ones.
And then the one last one, which is kind of around morality and rewarding teams, we kind of came up with 5 or 6 categories that the product owner and the Scrum Master can nominate their team for, and on a quarterly basis, our VP, both on the product and tech side, would present them with the award and maybe like have a team lunch. So again, just trying to say thank you and we appreciate your work. So that's our newest.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I forgot about that one. Any questions? Yeah, I mean, I know that there wasn't like a lot of answers in this, but that's kind of what I wanted to say, right? Is that I think a lot of us are in our journey now. It's not about dropping a framework on some teams. It's about finding what works.
So the title of your presentation is accidental. Where's the accident?
The accident was I didn't know. The accident was we just were running some experiments, and I realized that those experiments were lighting up very well with what Joshua was trying to say is the principles that you should be running your Agile shop by. It's a good question. Yeah.
Can you give an example of a couple of the awards that the teams get?
Sure, it's one of them is kind of like a Fellowship of the Ring. We have a Ron Burgundy. That's Are You Well Groomed? Right. Another one's like Flux Capacitor. Are they being innovative? And then we have kept criteria around that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So just fun stuff. Little.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
This was fun. For those that walked in late, my name is deanchanter. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter as agilechanter. I'm pretty active there, and so reach out for sure and stay in touch.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.